You gotta melt the hearts of ice that make war upon the world. Melt the hearts of ice that make war upon the world. Melt the hearts of ice that make war upon the world. Open up the prison gates that feed upon our children. Heal the wounded shadows that have lost all hope for freedom. Lift the broken bodies and rejoice in a new day.
Nuclear issue for me is the critical issue of our times. Okay, so here I am in my studio at my creative station, which is my piano. I still use an acoustic piano, baby grand, which is what I like. So my idea for the First Light musical, how it begins, is a conversation between Albert Einstein and Dr. Frankenstein. They are having a discussion about the process of the creation that they were involved in as scientists. And we see archival footage of the first atomic tests in the background and the whole beginning of the nuclear era, as well as scenes from the black and white original Frankenstein movie. And so that leads us into the opening music called Bringers of the Storm. This was a piece that I wrote when I first moved to California, when I was living on the beach in Venice Beach near Los Angeles. And big storm was coming across the ocean, and it just kind of came into me. I always find storms very inspiring times to compose music. So anyway, this music, which we recorded in Los Angeles back in the late 1980s, it became clear to me was perfect music for the opening of the First Light. And it tells through dance and through what's happening on the stage the story of the Hopi elders down in their kiva in Arizona in a ceremony where they know that one of their ancient prophecies is about to be fulfilled. They said that one of the signs of the end of this world cycle would be when a gourd of ashes falls from the sky. And you know, the Hopi make these gourd rattles, right? And they said that this gourd of ashes would shake the world. Okay? And so it's interesting that the mushroom cloud, of course, from the nuclear test, has a shape like this. And so they are chanting about their prophecy that time has come now when this first gourd of ashes will fall from the sky. And then we see the footage of the nuclear tests at the Trinity site in New Mexico, very close, of course, to Arizona. This was strangely preceded by a event in the early 1940s with some archaeologists excavated a figure that I have painted here in this painting I did based on some of the Hopi mythology. And it's of a figure called Panayoikyasi. He was buried in a crypt deep in the ground and represents the destructive force that's within the earth that must not be brought up, otherwise it will unleash destruction on the ground and above ground. And so the Hopis would bury these Panayoikyasi figures in the ground, face down, with the arm broken off, one of the arms broken off, so that Panayoikyasi could not do destruction. So some archaeologists had found this Panayoikyasi effigy and pasted the arm, glued the arm back on, and brought him up above ground. And it was shortly after this time that the first nuclear test occurred. Again, this meeting between history and mythology.
You mentioned too about a myth and reality, and also ritual performance. And Jim Berenholtz is a master at this, and he's experienced that when he does ritual in certain sites of power, what happens, reality shifts, and some event happens, oftentimes what looks negative, but It's really to show that the cause is even more important, more impending.
And so, for me, these mandala paintings that I do, the music that I write, the dance ideas that I have, it all is part of a organic creative process. This story that we tell in the beginning with the Hopi creation and prophecies leads us into, of course, ultimately Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the beginning of the nuclear age.
Takashi Tanemori. That Takashi means noble samurai. August 5th, 1985, exactly 40 years later, I was driving the junk American car, Chrysler, on the way to San Francisco. I was one of the guest speakers. And did you know, James? Had a 6 pages long speech, red mark, and every place I underlined exclamation mark. That's why I'm going to hit the podium. And I'm going to let the American people have it. So anyway, on the bridge, driving, as I pass in each trestle, and I feel like that's 40 years of my life is passing by. And as I came to Treasure Island, just before the treasure, I saw the shape of mushroom clouds over the yonder Treasure Island, over the city of Hiroshima. That triggered the dream, triggered August 6th, what did happen in Hiroshima. And I could not drive my car anymore because I was crying. And luckily I put into Treasure Island, I parked, shut the engine, parked, and cried behind the wheel. 1985, the day Japan surrendered, August 15. My father appeared to me in the spirit. There's a picture on the wall there. He wore the regal kimono. He came in the spirit, and first time I saw him, my daddy, in the kimono. And he stood in front of me, and he put him just like that on your shoulder. And Jim's son, he said, Takashi, I'm so proud of you. I said, Daddy, what do you mean by that? He said, Takashi, you have found the greatest way to avenge your enemy by learning to forgive. But I said, Daddy, I came to America for avenging your death. Then the first time he ever repeated, my father never repeated what he said, only once. But that night he repeated the same thing, said, my son, you have found the greatest way to avenge your enemy by learning to forgive. Then he disappeared.
This is just a little bit of the first part of the music I wrote for the song Father. Father, you gave your fire to me, feet to walk, lungs to breathe.
Father, I learned the world from you, and I learned the subtle ways that we avoid what's true. I've inherited your legacy, so I struggle forever to be free. Down the generations to our fathers we are tied, like the currents in a river, they are part of what's inside. And the influence they have on us can never be denied.
So one of the main characters in the First Light musical is a figure who doesn't speak or sing. He only dances. And this is Shiva, the god Shiva, as the Nataraj, the lord of the dance, who creates the dance of creation and destruction. And this is an image from India of Shiva as Lord Natraj, the Lord of the Dance. And Shiva first appears with the testing of the first nuclear weapon in New Mexico, when Oppenheimer, who was one of the key scientists behind the development of the nuclear bomb, quotes from the Hindu scriptures and says, "Now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds." And we see Shiva in his one-legged pose, doing this dance of destruction. And whenever there's a nuclear accident, whenever there's an atomic testing or any kind of nuclear event on the planet, from the beginning to the end of the show, Shiva appears doing his dance. And so he's a very important character in the show. And the mythology around Shiva is so incredibly linked with the nuclear story. I mean, for example, one of the stories about Shiva is that the world was about to be destroyed, and all of the gods and goddesses got together and begged Shiva to do something, because there was this destruction, this power that was in the ocean, some kind of poison that was going to destroy the whole planet. And so Shiva took this bowl of poison and drank it. He's a great power of transmutation, of transformation. And but he didn't swallow it completely. He held it in his throat, and his throat turned this dark indigo blue. And that's why Shiva is known as the blue-throated one, because he was able to hold this poison in his throat and transmute it. And so, the story about Fukushima and all this poison pouring into the ocean is so parallel to that story with Shiva. So Shiva gives us just an incredible amount of opportunities for teaching and metaphor throughout the show. And the next stage that we're going into in the development of this musical, which we need the funding for, is not only for the writing of 3 new songs, it's also to really flesh out all the characters, the whole script, the whole storyline of the musical, of Acts 1 and 2. Because I have so many different ideas of what I want to include in the musical, but it actually has to be written. So that script has to be done, and the lyrics for each song may not be finished, but the basic storyline, the basic format of who the characters are, how many instruments we're going to be able to have in the orchestra, figuring out all those details of what it will take to mount this show and make it still financially possible, because even though I have a Ziegfeld mind, we don't have a Ziegfeld budget. So all of that work to really hone in the details of the show will be done with this next stage of funding. That plus 3 new songs.
So I think it would be wonderful to have little kids actually singing on some of this at some point, when you get the money together to do the piece of the purchase.
Sure.
And I got 428 little kids.
Melt the hearts of ice that make war upon the world. Evaporate the lies and hate that feed upon our children. Heal the wounded shadows that have lost all hope for freedom. Lift the broken bodies and rejoice in a new day.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. Very good.
Very nice.
When the cold wind blows across our planet, nipping buds so fresh and new, When the thunder rolls across the heavens, causing all below to tremble. When the blossoms close for fear of tomorrow. When the dawn retreats, when lightning strikes. You gotta melt the hearts of ice that make war upon the world. Melt the hearts of ice that make war upon the world.
It's called the first light, which is the sun.
What made this journey significant for us as artists, and why we totally get behind Jim Berenholtz, is the concept of ritual performance. That ritual embodies an intention spiritually and planetarily, that when you align your creativity behind a cause, there's a resonance that goes on, and it becomes public, it becomes a declaration in the world. And especially on this issue, if we could create these events where people, even if they're mildly curious, would come to that, and it'd be a way to raise awareness
And consciousness.
and consciousness.